introduce our first two speakers. We have the Senate Republican leader, Mark Schoesler, and we have Senator Linda Evans Parlette, who is also an ag forestry grad, leadership grad, right?
Mm-hmm. So is Mark.
So Mark is too, I should have known that. All right. And I will turn it over to them. We are expecting two other speakers to come in, but when they are finished with their remarks, we'll take questions, unless the other speakers have already arrived, in which case we'll go through all the speakers before we open it to questions.
Thank you. First, I like the term majority leader better. Majority is so nice, and Majority Coalition Caucus, because anybody that's been here very long knows that Tim Sheldon is an integral part of our success, and I don't like to forget Tim. I'm really happy to have the trophy husband here today. That made my week a whole lot better when I found out what a great acquisition was coming. I thought maybe all the people in the room were because of Senator Parlette and I, and it was really because Ag Forestry is here. Not this many people would show up just for me. But I think it is important that Senator Parlette and I are both alumni. The value of the program, the number of people in this room that are participants, past, present, and perhaps future, is really important. That leadership comes from a lot of different parts of the state, and it's not just being legislators. We need good people in public service at each and every level. So thank you for your time and commitment to the program. I think I want to focus a lot on where we're at in the budget process right now. And I told my caucus this week and told leadership, I have not said yes to a single ask in the budget yet. And I've said no to a couple and hell no to a couple. And that's really not because I enjoy being negative. I'm the glass is half full caucus guy. But if we look at the bogey the Healthcare Authority handed the people of this state, we have a pie chart that a number of us are keeping in our offices. $477 million in a baseline four-year balanced budget due to the management of the Healthcare Authority. Now, if we cut them a little slack and get it down to $150 million, we're in a fairly reasonable position. But the things that we would like to do in government and avoid doing in government fall very heavily on the problems with the Healthcare Authority. And the person that is the director of the Healthcare Authority was not the first choice of Republican and Democrat leaders in healthcare or associations that understand healthcare. But when you look at all of the Medicaid and related funding decisions and unfilled promises, our ability to do what everybody in this room would like is handicapped. So that's particularly troubling. We know we can make changes at Western State Hospital. I think change is in the wind with 405. The problems that generated, some of you in this room talked to me about in the interim. Senator Hill took a note in. DOT doesn't think they have a problem. Honest to God, from Lynn Peterson's boss on down, they don't think they have a problem. Does anybody here think that DOT doesn't have a problem on 405? Thought so. And it's not just that. It's the financial aspects of 405. Senator King is pretty good with numbers, and so is Senator Hill. They both find great problems with the numbers on 405. So we really have to take a deep dive into this and continue to scrutinize how every one of those new transportation dollars is spent through this state. So right now, tomorrow is cutoff day at 5 o'clock for our policy committees, for those of you that are new. That's when we narrow the field down a little bit, sort of like the Iowa caucuses did. And then Monday we have our fiscal cutoff. But in the Senate, the fiscal cutoff is not nearly like it was last year. We're looking at technical corrections to a balanced, sustainable budget, not major policy adds. So I don't think it's going to be as exciting in Senate Ways and Means as it has been other years when we get to Monday night. But this isn't intended to be exciting. This is intended to be good government and sustainable budgeting. The other thing that I've been trying to describe why I'm cautious about plans to tap the rainy day fund or other spending items. And I couldn't give the right analogy of economics. So before I came to the office this morning, I was looking on DTN and I saw an ag economist banker, and he said, recessions are like a 9-inning baseball game in time apart. We're in the 7th or 8th inning between recessions. So if you're in the 7th or 8th inning, you don't want to squander any of the tools you have in winning that baseball game. So with spring training just around the corner, I think that's the best analogy for caution in our decision. So with that, you've got 3 other great speakers, and I'll sit down and shut up.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here, and it's thrilling to see so many ag forestry folks in the room. I actually didn't know that you were here, even though I know I'm speaking tomorrow. I guess it's hard to believe today's Thursday. The week goes so quickly. I apologize for being late. We had a healthcare meeting from 10 to 12, and we actually went till about 12:15 to get through the list of bills we had. We may have another healthcare meeting tonight. We may not. Sometimes we do those things on purpose so everybody continues to guess, because there's a lot of bills out there that sometimes do not get through the committee process. So the Senate, at the beginning of session, probably on the end of the second week or the beginning of the third week, did pass a charter school bill. So that went over to the House right away. Many of us don't have charter schools in our district. There are about 1,000 kids out there who perhaps have a choice to be excited about school because they're in another option, and that's the charter school bill. But that'll be something to watch in the end. Also, the education issue with McCleary. The House version of the bill is different than the Senate version. There'll be a task force to truly collect more information, but the deadlines to have that finished is where the difference is. So those are things that we'll have to watch. I think that Senator Schoesler did a good job of explaining the fire situation. Very unfortunate, because we have a 4-year balanced budget requirement. So when we do a budget, it doesn't balance just for the biennium. We have to balance out 4 years. And we really left the session on July 10th of last year in good shape with a good vote on that budget, both in the House and the Senate. So to come back being $700 million in the hole is not a good situation. Part of that's because of my district with all the fires. I represent Chelan and Douglas County, part of Grant, part of Okanagan. Big forest fires in 2012, 2014, 2015. It's expensive to fight fires, and that's probably about a $200 million price tag. And you heard Senator Schoesler say about $400 million or so because of mismanagement or not accurate estimates. So that puts us in a situation where we're not able to do a lot of the things that we would like to do normally in a supplemental budget year. As far as bills, there are a lot of bills out there, water bills, a lot of fire bills. I actually sponsored 2 bills. The hearings were yesterday. One having to do with our smoke management plan in this state, which definitely needs to be updated, and the other having to do with more thinning and prescribed burns, which seems to be that Washington State is way behind Oregon and Idaho, and that has been called out not only by the Seattle newspapers, but also locally for my new forest supervisor for the United States Forest Service for the Okanagan-Wenatchee Forest. So those kind of discussions, in the end, I think there will be a big omnibus bill to put a lot of those good ideas together, because we can't keep sending money out when our policy of dealing with fires doesn't seem to change. So we've got 2 House members here. I think I'll be short today because it's more fun for us to answer questions.
So, You've heard from our two Senate leaders. We have two House leaders here. Republican Dan Kristiansen is the Republican leader in the House, and with him is also in leadership, and someone you want to be particularly nice to because he has influential positions on House Finance and House Appropriations and Rules, J.T. Wilcox. So with that.
There we go. Now I can stand up straight. Hey, I want to thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. One of the things that's kind of interesting, especially with you ag and forestry people that are in the room, is you actually have, this maybe just by coincidence, everybody up here is related to the ag and forestry industry. We're in the lumber business. So you get them to us and we'll treat them properly and we'll sell them out there to the builders. But it's an interesting time right now. We're almost halfway through this short session. I'd like to remind you all, we're supposed to be dealing with emergencies. We're supposed to be dealing with technical fixes, adjustments to the budget, and yet we still have, between the House and the Senate, I think we're what do we have now? About 1,400 or 1,500 new bills have been dropped just in the last few weeks. So we've got a few distractions out there, and it's made it very difficult for some of us to try and keep on track as to what the real priorities are, while at the same time, I know there's a lot of folks that have been in my office, probably at least half of you in this room, concerned about interesting pieces of legislation that are out there, and with grave concern in many cases as to some of those pieces of legislation. I want to try and put a little bit of a calming tone on this. Most of those bills are dead, in case you didn't know. If you've been paying attention to what's been going on in the House Appropriations Committee last week, I think the combined time of two hearings that were scheduled for 4 hours ended up 50 minutes. Is that about right? 20 minutes one day and 30 minutes the next. That means that that's a good sign for those of you who want those bills to die. I think that they're well on their way to get there. You know, we are in a time that's very interesting. I'm a small business person, and you know, we are seeing something that is trending that disturbs me a little bit. We know that Washington State nationally has been even recently cited as being one of the best places, you know, as far as economy goes in the United States. We know, though, that if we really narrow it down, it's actually about a 10-mile corridor that's responsible for that. And that's at greater Seattle, Bellevue, Everett metropolitan area, based on how well they're doing locally. Of the 39 counties we have in Washington State, only 2 of them operate less than the national average of unemployment. 37 of our 39 counties are at or way above the unemployment levels that are as far as the national average go. And that is something that, you know, for us that represent districts like mine, which is a very rural district, most Republican districts are very rural districts. Matter of fact, there is not a single Republican that represents Seattle. Remember that. There is been this narrow focus on that region there that I think we need to take a second look at. My district was built on timber and mining. And now my average constituent drive to work is 40 miles one way, because the economies in my district are almost gone. And if we're not going to start looking at how do we expand the economic engine throughout the whole state, we're going to see a problem that's going to come and slap us really big, really bad, really hard for a long time. And that is that we've been focusing in on transportation. We've been focusing in on economic development. We've been focusing in on education. We've been focusing in on health and human services, almost all of which has ended up in that same corridor. While that's good for Seattle, Bellevue, and that area, it has proven not to be good for other areas. One of my key issues is dealing with mental illness. There's a lot of services in Seattle, and they complain there's not enough, which is an arguable, thing to talk about. But in districts like mine, we live in a semi-affordable community. Those people that don't have those six-figure jobs, they come and live in my neighborhood. We've still got mental illness in those parts of the state. We're not seeing those services. We're not seeing the transportation infrastructure. We're not seeing the health and human services infrastructure. We're not seeing, frankly, from even the larger business community, a focus on taking on some of these smaller communities, some of the more rural communities around the state of Washington. And I think it's something that we need to understand that, yes, while we are very blessed to have a strong, vibrant economy overall in the state of Washington, regionally speaking, we have really got a lot of work to do. And my hope would be that we're going to, interlock arms with the people that are sitting around us that have done very well in those metropolitan areas. And we're going to start looking outside those walls, and we're going to start working towards policy, whether it be tax, regulatory policy, whatever it may even be uncomfortable. But we're going to start looking at some of those reasons as to why has the economy gone south. You know that Aberdeen, Hoquiam area used to have one of the largest median incomes in the state of Washington? Look at it today. I was just there a couple months ago. Despite the fact that it looks like a ghost town, their economy has been wiped out by what? Decisions that have been made in this town. Truly. And we need to stand behind those folks and those communities. We need to get together and realize that if we're going to truly be representatives of the state of Washington, if you're going to truly have businesses or opportunities as you're coming out of school in the state of Washington, that we're going to have to kind of come alongside each other, yoke up together, and start dealing with this as a statewide issue, not just so narrowly focusing in just on that corridor, but certain industries. We've got to expand our thought process in this a little bit. And I know my caucus, that's one of the things that we are really interested in right now. We've worked hard as a caucus to help support and grow the economy in Washington state. And we've been successful, but it's been very narrowly focused, and we need to expand that out. And I'm really looking forward to working with you to that endeavor here as we move forward. Thank you. JT Wilcox.
Thank you, Dan. Is it on? There it is. Thank you very much, Dan. I appreciate that. And I, too, appreciate all the ag and forestry leadership people. My dad was in Class 1, and it changed his life in some really weird ways for his kids sometimes. But it was very important to him. It actually changed our family business, Wilcox Farms, and I think set us up for understanding that our job was marketing and public relations as well as just producing milk and eggs. And Dad felt so strongly about it that I think he was the second or the third chairman of the board, and that was a great experience for him too. It's the one thing that he did that I didn't do, so that probably held me way back, but it's nice to see that it is continuing as strongly as it is. Well, the House Republicans have had some challenges in the last couple weeks. We have been dealing with the loss of my seatmate. We had a member that resigned yesterday, which is painful because a caucus is like a family. But there is some good that has come from it. First of all, a couple of major newspapers have issued columns and editorials talking about the fact that House Republicans can take care of an ethical problem with dispatch. And they've drawn a stark contrast between the House Republicans and the Democrats, who have yet to really face the fact that we've got a deeply corrupt state auditor, and no one has hardly lifted a finger to try to change that. We may lift a finger here in a few days as well and try to get the ball rolling on cleaning up that part of state government. The other good that came out of this, I think, is when you've been a long-term minority caucus like the House Republicans have, people naturally question, are you ready for leadership? And I would say to all of you that watching, and if you talk to some Olympia insiders, I'm quite sure that they're going to agree with this, watching how Dan Kristiansen, who preceded me just now, dealt with an issue that would have torn apart other caucuses, proves that he's ready to be Speaker of the House as well. And I think that's an important lesson that we need to take away from this because we've got an election coming up. Well, I'm the floor leader, so I get to deal with bills when they have come through committee. But I'm also on some committees, and we have some interesting things happening. The House Democrats have employed for many years the Hastert rule, which means that they're not going to bring a bill out that they don't have the votes to pass. And that helps them with management of stakeholders and also with management of their members, but they are now talking about changing their approach. And the first place that they're talking about it is bringing the very punitive Boeing martyrdom bill out of the Finance Committee. And everyone here should be concerned about that. They don't think that they have the votes to pass it. They just want to bring it out so that their members that really, really want to have speeches bashing Boeing get a chance to do that, vote yes, and then probably it dies. But those speeches are going to be harmful. And I think it shows that there's really no functional majority in the House right now, that they are willing to do that and take those lumps. And they're only really talking about Boeing in this. It's silly because the jobs that are created spread clear across the economy, and the incentive originally was supposed to be about aerospace, but they've turned it into Boeing. But if you think that it's just about Boeing in the future, then you should listen to the sense of outrage, the sense of vengefulness that they are going after Boeing, because that could be turned on to any one of us here. And if you happen to be in the ag business, you've heard many speeches over the last few years on the House floor talking about how much the other side dislikes the food business as well. And sometimes the timber business comes in for a little bit of that. So I think that's a sad thing that is going to happen. It shows how weak they are and how much they have to now kowtow to individuals' members' anger. But they've only got 50 votes, and it takes 50 votes to pass something. So you have to make some accommodations to keep that 50 votes hanging together. Now, I would also say to all of you that have other bills that you're interested, everyone here that works in Olympia knows that many, many times there are good bills that could be passed with Democratic votes plus some Republican votes. They don't bring those to the floor because of the Hastert rule. If they decide to bring that Boeing let's beat up on Boeing bill out, then every one of you should be lined up at Frank's office demanding that your bill gets the same treatment. Because if they bring that Boeing bill out without the votes to pass it, then all these other good bills should come out as well. Well, today on the floor, you can tell I'm a little fired up. I'm not normally quite like this. But today was an interesting day, and it's funny. I gave a speech telling our members to let's keep it toned down today because they were difficult issues on the floor, but it started out being National Guard Day, and we're going to honor the National Guard. Well, we recently had a tragedy where a service member was killed while he was acting in a heroic way, and we got to meet his widow. She didn't really give a speech. She actually just talked about him, and there were not any dry eyes in the caucus today. It was deeply moving in a way that I didn't really expect. Then we went out and got to vote on the 3 most political bills of the session. These were run out for purely political reasons. These are bills that we are opposing because they crush the economy, but they sound really, really good. They've got a great bill title. So every member of the House Republicans that voted no on these bills, because we believe in supporting the economy and we believe in regulation that's effective, not regulation that simply makes a political point, are going to get crushed with negative ads in the future because we voted for the economy and actually on the side that most of you would be on. There is a pregnancy accommodation bill, excuse me, where we offered a responsible amendment that would have strengthened protections for pregnant women but would not create a legal free-for-all. That was defeated on a party line vote, and they passed the bill on a party line vote. There was an opportunity gap bill that was very expensive, asked the school system to, let's tear up all of your discipline policies one more time after we got done tearing them up last year, and let's do this for purely political reasons. We talked about charter schools that really would help solve the opportunity gap. Guess what happened to that conversation? Norma Smith brought up charter schools. She got gavelled. So that's a conversation that they don't want. That bill also passed on a party line vote, and there was a voting rights bill. We have a great federal Voting Rights Act. We've seen it in action. It has solved problems all over the country. But for political reasons, the other side wanted a Voting Rights Act. Again, we've got actually experts that teach at the university level on voting and voting rights. We had a great amendment that would have turned this into an advantage instead of a burden that in the end is going to crush things like small town school districts. One more time, it's just simply a party line vote. So that's what it's like being in the minority. We've got this out of the way for a while. We're going to get down to business pretty soon. I think that the other side kind of wants to get out of here. So I do not see a huge amount of turmoil when it comes to a budget. I think everybody is a little scared by the fact that thanks to the incompetence of the HCA, we've got some some big mountains to climb. In fact, there's one that hasn't been mentioned yet. It turns out that the PEB board, instead of operating as a defined contribution, is now sort of operating as a defined benefit, and they're overspending their mandate. So one more burden that we're going to have to try to figure out how to fund. I've been asked to wrap up and ask for questions.